Hi, so I've gotten some feedback that people have questions about where to complete their fieldwork hours. So you need to do your ECE 410 fieldwork in a classroom that provides programming to children age birth through 8 years old, which is typically second grade. Okay. Um, that's the only criteria that it has to be a license, a program that the Department of Health, the Department of Education um, certifies to say they can provide programming to children birth to um, grade two. So it can be a daycare program, a childcare program, a nursery school, a preschool, Head Start, early Head Start. It can be a public school, any of those programs. It can be a program for children with disabilities, does not have to be. There does not have to be a child with an IEP or an IFSP in the classroom, and you should not ask under any circumstances if there is a child. We are not allowed to ask if there is a child with an IEP or an IFSP, an individualized education plan, or an IFSP, or a child with a disability in the class. That is confidential information. So we're not allowed to ask that information. Now, clearly, some people have visible disabilities. And so when you look at a child, you might be able to see, there is a child with a disability in the class. But we are not allowed to ask if there is a child with a disability in the classroom. So if you are placed in ECE 409 or ECE 411 and doing field work for those classes, where you are doing your field work is acceptable to do your field work for 410. If you need help finding a field work site, please reach out to me and can help you find a field site. But you should not ask if there's a child with a disability or if there's a child who has an IEP or a suspected child with an disability or an IFSP, because that is breaking the law. That's asking the teacher to break the law. They should not disclose that information. So it just has to be an early childhood classroom, and that program has to be licensed to provide programming. It has to have a teacher to provide programming to children ages birth to second grade. So it can be a public school. It can be, as I said, a Head Start, nursery school, daycare. So if you're doing 409, 411, and you're doing fieldwork hours for that class, you want to talk to your cooperating teacher and the director about doing additional hours. You want to do 2 to 3 hours additional per week. What does that mean? If your ECE 409 for 11 hours are 2 days a week and your hours are 9 to 11:30, you want to ask, can you stay until 2? Or maybe you want to come in at 8:30 and stay until 1:30, right? And so the time between 9 and 12:30 is your ECE 411 or 409 hours. The time between 8:30 and 9, and the time between 12:30 and 1, or the time between 12:30 and 2 is your ECE 410 hours. And you would write that on your fieldwork timesheet. So there is some information in um, Brightspace under course info, fieldwork, that describes what the program should look like. We are never ask if there's a child with a disability. That is against the law for us to ask. So we do not ask. Okay? We just need a classroom that has a teacher. When it's time for us to identify a focus child, we don't know if that child has an IEP, and we'll talk about how we identify a focus child. But it's not because that child has an IEP. Um, I'll tell you now, it's because we have questions about that child or we want to get to know that child a little better. So we spend some time observing them. And that will be part of our case study project. But it does not have to be a program that works with children with disabilities or that has a child with an IEP or an IFSP or a suspected disability in the class. So I hope I have made that clear. If you have questions, please reach out to me. Okay? I hope you have a great afternoon. Be well.